What's up, everybody? Welcome back into Lettermen Row. It is a big day on the Ohio State football beat for Lettermen Row, for the program, the Ohio State football program, and for Lettermen Row, for that matter. Brian Hartline, it's a big day for him. He's the new Ohio State offense coordinator, Tim. We're going to jump right into it. We talked about this a lot when
Yep.
Kevin Wilson was named the head coach at Tulsa. This was expected, coming for a long time. You were on the pulse of this. Lettermen Row was on the pulse of this. We kind of expected this to happen. We knew it was coming. But on Friday, Ohio State makes it official. Brian Hartline is the next Ohio State offensive coordinator. Tim, initial reaction to a 5-year stretch now that has seen Brian Hartline be a graduate assistant, an interim coach, a wide receivers coach, and now an offensive coordinator at the premier program in the country.
Well, you just stole my thunder about the timeline. Yeah, I mean, we talked about this being the obvious move. If he was going to do it, if Ryan Day was going to make this move in-house, it was probably going to be this a month ago, So there's no real scoop going on here. Bottom line is, only thing is, this has now been validated and had that what is it, the King's wax thing put on the seal. But in my opinion, it makes total sense for all kinds of reasons. Brian Hartline is a hot name out in the coaching community, as we all know, because of his prowess in developing relationships, is the way he likes to call it, instead of recruiting. But then the players he has developed, both developing relationships and developing playing ability, which go hand in hand. You don't see him recruiting 2-star receivers, if you follow my drift. It's been quite the attraction, and why not take advantage of it? And something that we're going to talk about is lack of experience, maybe in the coaching realm. Well, he's been doing it for a while now, as you just pointed out. At least 5-6 years, he's been heavily involved in the last 5 as a full-time assistant coach. So he's got that going for him. And number two, Lincoln Riley's little brother, Garrett Riley, is now the new offensive coordinator at Clemson, after being the offensive coordinator at TCU and SMU the last couple of seasons. That guy's only 33. Brian's, I think, 36. Lincoln Riley's only 39, for that matter. So age, in my opinion, has nothing to do with it. He's going to be overseen heavily by Ryan Day, who's stepping back from the offensive coordinator, more of the play calling role than he has been. But I think this makes all kinds of sense in all kinds of ways.
Yeah, Andy, this is a move, like we said, widely expected, but still, when it happens, it's a big deal for Brian Hartline to take the next step in his career and to have it done at Ohio State. He was a candidate for the head coaching job at Cincinnati. He was a candidate for the offensive coordinator job at Kentucky. Notre Dame tried to hire him as wide receivers coach last year when Marcus Freeman took that job. A lot of programs want Brian Hartline. Ohio State is being able to lock him into this spot and make him the offensive coordinator. I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon, because I would expect this to come with a pretty large pay raise, Andy.
Yeah, and it's back-to-back promotions for him. Last year getting promoted to the pass game coordinator. This year now he's the offensive coordinator. And I think that's a way to reward a young coach that is a hot name in this industry. And you have to do things to keep them around because, as you mentioned, Spencer, there's interest for him, not only at the coordinator level, but also at the head coaching level. And it's only a matter of time before he gets that opportunity. But for right now, he's at Ohio State. And for the foreseeable future, he's at Ohio State. And I think his pull with recruits is something that we can't overstate, not just like wide receivers, but just the way he carries himself, the kind of charisma he has, the aura he brings. It's really powerful within the building and even outside the building. Kids want to play for Brian Hartline. And I think as an offense coordinator, that's even more powerful than just as a wide receivers coach. So I think that goes further in the recruiting realm than any of us can really overstate.
Absolutely. And so now Ohio State gets to move forward, Tim, with a new offensive coordinator, with Ryan Day potentially pulling back the reins on his play calling duties, with Justin Fry officially announced as the new, as we get the news here as we're speaking, actually, the run game coordinator. Yeah, Tony Alford remaining the associate head coach and running backs coach. Corey Dennis sticking with the quarterback's duties. It's not a full staff reshuffle at all, but it is a retooling of resources, reallocating those resources to make Brian Hartline have a bigger say, to make Justin Fry really take hold of that run game and make it what he wants to make it, rather than maybe what's gone a little, not wrong, but awry in some ways the last couple of years in that running game. So it is a different way of looking at offense, a new retooling, and different voices having different opinions about things. And I think it's going to be beneficial for Ohio State. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, Yeah, I'm curious because obviously Keenan Bailey, we all know he was basically confirmed to the staff, from a verification standpoint, 3 or 4 weeks ago, as the tight ends coach, or at least taking the spot left by Kevin Wilson, who's now moves on to be the head coach at Tulsa, the former offensive coordinator at Ohio State. But Keenan Bailey worked so closely with Brian Hartline for several years. I'm just curious to see how this really does shake out. I mean, probably will still stick with Keenan Bailey, a first-time full-time assistant coach in that regard at the tight end spot. But he could also, if they decided to kind of shuffle things around, he could possibly move to wide receiver. And if they want to go away from that special teams coordinator role for Parker Fleming and maybe change things up in that realm, like they used to have a couple of coaches involved with different parts of the special teams, you could see them moving like Parker Fleming to maybe a tight ends coach, but still having some responsibilities in the special teams area, along with several other coaches, maybe even Ryan Day. So there are all kinds of ways Ryan Day can go with this staff. I'm curious to see how. I can't remember a wide receiver coach being an offensive coordinator before. I'm sure it's happened in the past, but maintaining those duties, while he also is the offensive coordinator. So we'll see if in fact Ryan Day's got a few more changes up his sleeve. And I'm also curious to see, before everything settles out, how the defensive staff, whether there might be some shifting around in that realm. But that's probably on down the line here.
Yeah, the one that comes to mind, Tim, is Jeff Scott at Clemson during their national championship runs, two different national championship runs. I believe he was the wide receivers coach and co-offensive coordinator.
Yeah, he was co-offensive coordinator
for
correct.
those runs. And I think that's a little bit of what Brian Hartline's role will be. Yes, he has the role of offensive coordinator, but there's a run game coordinator for a reason. And so, is he truly the sole voice in there? Absolutely not. And so I think that's where you could draw that comparison to those Clemson teams that won 2 national championships, as Brian Hartline could be comparable to what Jeff Scott did as co-offensive coordinator. But you talked about the defensive staff. I want to make a note, and I think this is important. Friday, January 13th, here we sit on this Zoom call with both of you guys, Andy, as I kick it over to you. Ryan Day announced the offensive staff. The offensive staff is set, but he did not announce the defensive staff. And so I think that is worth noting. It's interesting to me that you have your offensive coordinator in place. You have your run game coordinator in place, associate head coach, quarterbacks coach. You announced the new tight ends coach, Keenan Bailey, as the tight ends coach. Didn't really have any news to report on the defensive staff. Whether that means that it's going to be the status quo from now to next January, possibly. There's not a need to announce anything, or they're waiting to see decisions to be made. So it's just an interesting time to be announcing just to the offensive staff, but at the same time you want to give Brian Hartline that distinction of being the offensive coordinator as you move forward in recruiting, Andy.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think it's totally out of the question that we'll see some shuffling on the defensive side of things. I think it's just, quite frankly, they want to give the attention to Brian, and it's well deserved to have this title bump right here. And I think what we're doing with Justin Fry as well is another thing to note, because he was the offensive coordinator at UCLA along with being the offensive line coach there. So he has, experience in that position, and even just as a run game coordinator, I think that'll be a great help to Brian Hartline. And as you mentioned, the run game this year was a big topic of discussion, not only because of scheme wise, but also just running back health. And then, the offensive line had a lot of NFL talent, but you're going to be losing some of that. So that's going to go hand in hand with the offensive line next year and retooling that unit with getting the run game back on track. But as far as the defensive staff goes, maybe it's just wanting more continuity if we don't hear any changes up until next season. Maybe it's wanting to give a true test of a second year with this system for Jim Knowles and with a lot of guys coming back. So, I mean, we heard about Tommy Eichenberg, and that's just the headliner of a lot of guys coming back on defense for a system that was new this year. So maybe we'll, hear some similar shuffling for the defensive side of the ball, but maybe we won't. And maybe that's because they want continuity.
Yeah, something's got to be addressed in that secondary, though, in some form or fashion. If they get that figured out, this could be a hell of a football team in 2023, even though they're going to have 3 new starters on the offensive line. But back to Brian Hartline, I'm curious to see how, you know, the 4-2-5 is Jim Knowles' defense. You know, he brought it with him. The Ohio State offense is a collaboration. It, you know, going back even to Urban's days and things that Ryan Day brought to the table. And it'll be interesting to see what Brian Hartline brings to the table. I don't think anybody is going to, you know, step back and go, this is Brian Hartline's offense. You know, this will be Ohio State's offense. There will, I'm sure of that, you know. But then what I like about what Brian Hartline has brought to the passing game, just like Ryan Day did. He brought an even fresher look at it from a melding a more professional route tree in there, things like that, which is, I think, paid dividends. And so we'll see where that aspect of this offense goes. And then making the running game, you know, making Justin Fry the run game coordinator. I'm not sure what that really changes much of in this offense from the standpoint of you might favor one play more than others and stuff, but we've seen the blocking schemes that Justin Fry is teaching, et cetera, and that's part and parcel to what you do offensively with your running backs and stuff. So it'll be curious to see which direction that goes. But getting Cade Stover back to this offense, getting those main ingredients from a weapon standpoint is huge for a first-time offensive coordinator. Brian Hartline, I think that's as much to do with his naming Brian Hartline. Now they got to get that offensive line straightened out.
Yeah, as everything starts to come together for this Ohio State coaching staff, the Ohio State roster, we're getting NFL decisions by the day. Now we're getting coaching announcements by the day, Tim, Andy. It's a big day for Ohio State, a big day for Brian Hartline, as he is the new Ohio State offensive coordinator. We will be breaking down what that means more so. Even though we just did it here, we're going to do it more at LettermenRow.com, where we break down the Buckeyes and their decisions and their movements and their impact all year long, all month long. There's no offseason at LettermenRow.com. Come join the fun. $30 until next August. That is a heck of a deal, fellas, if I do say so myself. But for Tim on the other side of that screen, for Andy on the other side of that screen, I am just Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We will see you guys back at LettermenRow.com whenever news breaks, because we're always on top of it at LettermenRow.com covering Ohio State football.